My name's Taylor Gerring, and I got into the crypto space a few years ago. I was on sabbatical from typical jobs and looking for something new and interesting. And in that time, I found this Bitcoin thing. And I started researching it, and I jumped down the rabbit hole of crypto, and I haven't climbed my way back out yet. So now I'm working on Ethereum and any of the other interesting decentralization projects that are popping up in the space. I helped establish the Ethereum Foundation in Switzerland initially, and I started working on a lot of technical processes, helping with the servers and infrastructure, and now I'm moving more towards community outreach, adoption, and education, really trying to push the protocol and the technology into the general public and let them understand the different uses for it. I think that Ethereum is definitely more than a technology. We see Ethereum is also a community. I'm beginning also to think that Ethereum is a philosophy about how to use technology to build better bridges between humans, to coordinate better amongst ourselves. At the end of the day, blockchain allows for coordination amongst parties who maybe aren't in front of each other. And this is something that, as humans, we've relied on for a long time, being able to speak to someone face to face. But in a new digital age, this is not always the case. We do commerce online all the time, and we don't actually see these people. We can't shake their hands. This is something hard for us to cope with. So I think that Ethereum represents a new way of using technology to improve relationships between people, using digital systems that we can rely on, that don't go down, that are encouraging of free speech and open access. And these are principles that I think everybody can get behind. It's interesting. I've been giving some talks, and one of the recent talks I gave kind of gave some context to where we are within the blockchain space, the payment space, and just even more generally in the internet. It's only about 20 years ago that people didn't really know what an email address was or what the funny little @ symbol was in the middle of it. But here we are today, and it's completely ubiquitous. We see it on TV everywhere. Nobody even asks what it is. And further, people born after, let's say, 1995, they haven't really lived in a world without internet. So things are changing really rapidly, and I think people will start to understand this, especially as the younger people kind of grow up. They'll appreciate some of the fabric that supports this new and improved internet. I think one of the major challenges that we face as an industry is helping other people understand why we view this technology as meaningful and important to society. As technologists, we tend to focus on very specific details of why we think it's fun or important or interesting. But we have to push beyond that and actually explain to general society how this can change their lives in a beneficial way, whether that's remittance of value back home, or whether this is creating a more integrated IoT environment for their home, or making a better internet that's more private and more secure by default. This is the thing that we have to move outside of our bounds and explain to the general public how it makes their lives better. It's hard to say how it'll affect any of our lives. I mean, I like to think back to Sir Tim Berners-Lee, one of the pioneers of the web. And when he had this idea of hyperlinked documents and being able to cross-reference information, I don't think he ever anticipated something like streaming video on the internet. I don't think Tim Berners-Lee thought, let's invent this new technology so one day people can have memes about Netflix and chill, right? So it's really hard to predict where this technology is going to go, but I think that's the really interesting part of it. And Vitalik wrote a blog post a long time ago about what are the main uses of blockchain. And we saw with Bitcoin, actually, the value transfer mechanism, there are some strong use cases. You know, value on the internet is a hard thing to do with credit cards. So we need a kind of a natural mechanism for this. But all the rest of the applications are going to be things that we might have a lot of difficulty envisioning. And just like with the original internet, how it works today is probably quite different than they envisioned it. If we're truly successful with blockchains, then the way that they're used in the future will be, inconceivable to us now. I joined the crypto community being very much interested in Bitcoin, and I was all for this technology and building everything on top of it we could. But it became apparent to me after some time that in fact we can't have a single technology to support every single use case. And as we tried to expand that technology to allow for more use cases and more configuration and so forth, we found it really difficult to form the social consensus between the humans on how best to go about this. It became a very slow, arduous process. And because of that, effectively is why Ethereum was born, was a desire to build more stuff faster. And that's something that Bitcoin, understandably, maybe shouldn't do, right? We have a technology that has a valuation of around $10 billion, and I don't know about you, but certainly I don't want to be the programmer that creates an error that causes that entire value to disappear from the system. So I understand why people are really cautious, but I think that just goes to show that it's worth having more technologies so we can experiment elsewhere. And if it's worth bringing those technologies back into Bitcoin, that's great. And if those technologies diverge because of philosophical differences or technical requirements, that's great too. The more blockchains we have, the more decentralization we have, it will only help improve the space overall. I think Ethereum's doing already a great job at trying to keep a positive portrayal of blockchains and cryptographic technology. There's a lot of fear-mongering around new technology in general. If you look back to the invention of the car, there's a lot of people who were afraid of the speed and the noise and the impact to society. But in the end, these were unsubstantiated fears, and we see actually there's no problem with a car, there's actually no problem with an airplane, we can go actually faster than sound, and we have the same kind of problem whenever any new technology comes around. And I think Bitcoin, handled the brunt of maybe the fear-mongering and people using it for maybe not so great uses. But one thing I do feel that we've done really well in the Ethereum community is focusing on the really great implications of this technology. If we ignore the money component, I think that takes out a lot of the controversy of these technologies. And in fact, the value transfer aspect to Ethereum is kind of a side feature. It's not really the important aspect of it. Really, the important aspect of this is to be able to build new, better abstractions that are designed with the internet in mind. We are using an internet that was built on 1960s, 1970s technology. Here we are in 2016, and we still send plain text emails, despite the fact that we know large governments and corporations read these things. I think it's important for regulators to understand that as a community, we're really focused on the positive aspects of the technology and building systems that actually improve society. So whereas you have maybe some fear and concern over what negative impacts the technology could have, in fact, we're doing everything possible to build the positive aspects of this technology and communicate how it could in fact improve our lives, make the internet a better place, more secure, more private by default. And no matter if you're a regulator or an average person walking on the street, I think that everybody can kind of appreciate that the internet is part of our daily lives today. We carry around supercomputers in our pocket, permanently connected to the world's information. And if we're going to live in that kind of world, we're going to need the technology to make sure that it meets our needs. As humans, we're used to things like being able to step into a side room and have a private conversation. And despite the fact that the internet's been here for 40 years, we don't quite have that ability on the internet today. It's very, very difficult to ensure you have a private conversation with a relative or something like that. So I think building these kinds of parallels in our digital lives that meet the needs just as we had them in a real world, I think people are understanding that, whether they're regulators or not. And while there is concern over privacy and encryption and negative uses of that, people have those abilities today in the real world, and we just need a way to cope with this in the digital world. And blockchains creates this kind of digital uniqueness that we haven't previously had, and that's the unique thing about it. Once we have these parallels in the digital world, just like the offline world, I think it will become clear that actually these are all really great things to happen. And although bad things happen in the offline world and the online world, the vast majority of people are using these tools and technologies for good things, to improve their lives, to help them connect with loved ones. And that's something that anybody on earth can appreciate. It's hard to say really, because there's two sides to the regulation. Too much regulation can certainly stifle innovation. On the other hand, we're starting to see that lack of clear guidance on appropriate uses can also stifle innovation. And I think this is one of the reasons that we've seen more growth of blockchain technology in Europe and other parts of the world, is in fact we don't have clear understanding of how, for example, the United States intends to treat virtual currencies or blockchain technology, or if in fact they even differentiate the two. So I would challenge regulators to understand the nuances of the technologies and provide the kind of guidance that we need to encourage innovation without preemptively creating laws that might stifle it. My hope over the next couple years is actually we'll take all the things that we've been building for the past couple years and start to build new, bigger things on top. The way I like to explain this is we've been building the Lego blocks, right? We have yellow blocks and blue blocks and green blocks. These are the basic components that we need. And once we have all these, we can start to build better things. We can start to build a Lego castle and a Lego town and a whole new Lego society that uses these new improved technologies. So what we've been doing so far is manufacturing these Lego blocks, and now I think it's time to play and start putting things together and making new, interesting dApps online that people can go experiment and play with and maybe spark some innovation and creativity in their own mind. And that's really what I hope over the next 2 years, that we start to see a blossoming of these decentralized applications online.